E'awani. I know your name, I know your works. Interview with Reza E'awani, one of the best-known philosopher of modern Iran, of traditionalist tendency, and great specialist in Sohrawardi and Ishraq and Irfan. I would like to know in main feature the history of the center of studies of tradition founded by Nasser, and what institution or intellectual group represents the same idea in modern Iran.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, the present Iranian Institute of Philosophy, which was formerly called the Iranian Philosophical Society, was established by the Farnas, and then some traditional scholars were invited there, and some distinguished foreign professors of philosophy and scholars like Professor Korban, Professor Izutsu, and others, and also some distinguished Persian scholars were there to teach, pure and genuine Islamic philosophy. And there were many students there. Now they are professors in their own right. Professor Chitik and others and myself attended the courses and classes there. And after the revolution, for about more than 20 years, 25 years, I was the head of that institute. It was turned into an institute. It was a philosophical society. It was turned into an institute. And it's functioning right now.
Perfect. So, what names of actual Iranian philosopher could be representative of this Ishraq or traditionalist tendency?
You see, in Iran, one of the features of philosophy in Iran is that it has had a very, very continuous life, even before Islam right now. You have different schools, living schools, not dead schools. For example, there have been a master-disciple relationship from Avicenna, and before Avicenna, right down to the present. I had many teachers who could trace back their lineage to Avicenna, to Sohrawardi, to Tusi. You see, who were their professors. So philosophy in Iran is not studied as history of philosophy as in the West, never, but as a living tradition. For example, if you read Mullah Sadra, you are concerned with live issues of philosophy, problem of being, problem of man, problems of cosmology, even very delicate issues of logic, of epistemology, of ontology, and many, many different issues. And since you have a very long tradition, and there is a lot of criticism also, revival, and innovation in a tradition, not in the modern sense, innovation within a tradition. So it's a living tradition. So, but to the Western audience, there were some people who worked a lot in order to introduce, because Islamic philosophy, the Orientalists who came to study, let's say Iran or Islamic world, they were never concerned with philosophy at all, which is Sophia in the true sense of the word, because the West did not inherit Greece. See, the true inheritors of Greece, Greek Sophia, were Muslims. They imbibed, and through Islam it was conveyed and transmitted to the West. So all the works were translated. There was complete translation of works, original works, and the main commentaries, and it was absorbed. People like Averroes, Avicenna, Farabi, they didn't know any Greek, but they were very well versed in the worldview, in the problems. but they surmounted and, let's say, absorbed and went beyond. See, what you see in Avicenna is not Aristotle. It is Aristotle, based on Aristotle, but going far beyond Aristotle. If you read, for example, the book of Shefa of Sufficientia, it's quite different. Even there are many main problems in Avicenna and metaphysics. It's quite different from metaphysics. You have a pure ontology. You have a pure ontology. For example, you do not have this distinction between essence and existence in Aristotle at all as a basis for metaphysics. There is no distinction. You do not have, you see, the description of the world as contingent being and God as necessary being. You see, it's based on purely new ontology of Avicenna, which you have a distinction between God and the world, this contingent being. You do not find this in Aristotle. Even if you have other proofs for the existence of God in Aristotle, for example, you have 5 proofs, but this proof of contingency and necessary contingency proof goes back to Avicenna, and its main errors makes a distinction between world and God. It's very, very, very metaphysical, more metaphysical than any other proof. So you have metaphysica generalis, pure ontology, and metaphysica specialis, which is pure theology. You have no distinction in Aristotle at all, in the book of metaphysics at all. So it's pure. But even Avicenna, right in the beginning of his magnum opus, that is Sufficientia or Shefa, he says that I've written this book. It's a very great encyclopedic work, comprising many works, 8 works on logic, 1 work on metaphysics, and others. Now he says right at the beginning that I've written a book according to peripatetics. I have just filled out the lacuna and the gaps. There were many, many gaps, and there were many, many, let's say, deficiencies. So I made the complete system. But I've written this book according to that methodology, but this is not my philosophy. Those who want to know about my philosophy should read a book I've written on Oriental philosophy. And he had written a book of Oriental philosophy. We have the introduction. He had written the book of arbitration, arbitrating on more than 20,000 problems between East and West. Unfortunately, this book is lost. It was destroyed by his arch enemy Mas'ud Ghaznavi, because they did not like philosophy when they came and attacked Isfahan. They were the enemies of Avicenna, and they attacked his home and destroyed everything, and this book was lost forever and was not able to write again. But he has said that it was about arbitration between Easterners and Westerners on more than 20,000 problems. And we have, for example, other, let's say, mythical books and treatises which were published by Corban. Now, this line of Oriental philosophy was continued by Sohrawardi. See? And there is a great difference here between Aristotle and Sohrawardi. So in Aristotle, philosophy is purely discursive, ratiocinative, and based on mere argument and this thing. But according to Sohrawardi, there is a higher kind of philosophy, which is true philosophy, what he calls al-hikmah al-zawqiyya. Perhaps it would be better to translate as either theosophy or sapiential wisdom. Sapiential coming from sapere, to taste. And exactly hikmat al-zawqiyya, which uses dhawq, means to taste. Not to conceptualize. For example, you conceptualize what sugar. You do not know what sugar is. You have to taste. You have to taste. So, it has 2 levels. The lower level is discursive life, higher level is sapiential wisdom. And what he calls theosophy is sapiential wisdom, not, I mean, the combination of discursive philosophy, like in Plato, you should first complete discursivity, and then you should enter another dimension. According to him, great sages of the past and Eastern philosophers, of course, they all had this kind of wisdom. Because he mentions even Buddha, he mentions ancient Persians, he mentions Plato. Plato was, for him, was a great imam, was imam of philosophers. He is the leader of all philosophers because he was best able to combine discursive philosophy with sapiential wisdom. But strangely enough, all Sufis, according to him, like Bayazid Bastami, like Junaid, are the possessors of the higher wisdom, theosophy, even if they lack discursivity, discursive philosophy, you see. And this is something new. According to Aristotle, philosophy is Greek, but he says no. Philosophy, everywhere where there are human beings, there are great philosophers. And if we suppose that it started from a certain moment in history, so God should be envious and should be stingy not to bestow his infinite and his infinity. He has been bestowing wisdom and philosophy to all nations and to all great communities. And Orientals, of course, there is a symbolic relationship between East and West. Orientals were the possessors of the highest kind of wisdom, it is theosophy and sapiential wisdom. Even if they did not have discursivity, but sometimes they had discursivity. So this idea is against Aristotle and Hegel. According to Aristotle, only Greeks had philosophy and the others were barbaroi, berbers, that is, they didn't understand anything. This is just the opposite. And again, the Hegelian conception of philosophy, according to him, because for Hegel, truth is not important. Truth is historical. And what is, in his worldview, reason as freedom alone, not reason as truth. Reason. So East has no philosophy, according to him. No philosophy, only starts from Greece and ends in Hegel. Ends in Hegel. And that's...
Very interesting. And could you tell us about the activity of Henri Carbin here in Iran, and what, how in actual modern Iran, which attitude toward Carbin exists?
Yeah, as I said, philosophy existed in Iran as a living reality from disciples to, but it was not known in the West because philosophy is a very, very deep and abstruse subject, very difficult to understand. It's a very, very great philosopher. Since those who came to study West did not have a philosophical training at all. They studied history, they studied everything, and even they tried to study theology, kalam, dogmatic theology. Yeah, many studies in dogmatic theology, but not in Shiism, because it was linked with a very great, let's say, intellectual tradition, wisdom tradition. They did not have the sufficient background, because philosophy is not an easy thing. You want to study Plato, it's not easy to, or St. Thomas, or let's say, great sages in Orthodox, let's say in Orthodox Russian Orthodoxy, they should be great minds and great spirits. But those who usually came and studied, usually studied other subjects other than philosophy. He was the only person who had this sufficient background, because he was a philosopher in his own right. I had seen him, I taught and attended his class. I always saw him as a very great philosopher. Not only was the first translator of Heidegger, and he had studied Husserl, the master of Husserl and phenomenology. He was a student of Etienne Gilson, a student of Brevier, a student of Cassirer, and many others. I saw Massignon, Ritter, and other. I saw the list of his masters. I mean, there were many more than that. many people whom I do not remember now, but these were few of his. So even if he had not come to study Islamic philosophy, he would be a philosopher in his own right, like Heidegger, and he would be a very great name in Western philosophy as Heidegger, I think, or as anybody, because when he studied and translated Heidegger, it was in the beginning of his youth, and in his ripe age, he would be a very great philosopher. But when Ritter or Massignon, in a course we had taken with Massignon, gave him a book of Sohrawardi Ekvator to read, he was forever absorbed. He became a disciple of Sohrawardi and left everything behind. We were in Iran, they wanted to celebrate the 70th birthday of Heidegger, and they came from Germany to make an interview with him. He didn't accept. He said, I've left behind. Even if I like Heidegger very much, but this is not my present concern. My present concern is the Islamic philosophy. I mean, this one, of course, it started from Heidegger, but Heidegger was beginning, never the end. Never the end. For him, people like Sohrawardi, like Ibn Arabi, like Mullah Sadr, and others were really sages, which we're looking for. Because, after all, in Heidegger, man is the final and ultimate. And this world is the ultimate. There's nothing beyond it. See? And this fear of death, because there's nothing beyond it. But this is not Qurban, this is not Mullah Sadr, it's just the very beginning. It's just the very beginning. And man is not the final end. We should not, of course, man is very important, but to know oneself, I mean, it's the Socratic, let's say, slogan, Gnofi se'atu, know yourself. Even if we should try to know our design as we are, not as an ultimate. There's much more ultimacy beyond us. And I don't think that it was the concern of Heidegger.
But
was it?
that's the problem.
That's the problem.
I think...
But it's not clear at all. In Mullah Sadr, it's very clear in every page. It should be very clear. Of course, you can make many interpretations. But I think one should be very, very clear. For example, if you read any page of Sohrawardi, you can see it in every page. You can, in great, let's say, Orthodox thinker, when you read, for example, Radayev, I mean, the whole book you read, you cannot, let's say, probe into corners to find one word, whether it refers to God or not.